Get ready for the Very Visible Business Podcast with David Avrin. Each week featuring a candid and raucous conversation with some of the most innovative, outspoken, and entrepreneurial business minds in the world today. This is the Very Visible Business Podcast. And here's David Avrin.
And welcome to the Very Visible Business Podcast. I'm David Avrin, and each week or each month or whenever I get around to doing these interviews, I get the great opportunity of interviewing some phenomenally interesting and engaging people, and mostly because I get to choose who they're going to be. So I look at the people who I'm a big fan of, who I'm big friends with, and say, let's have a conversation. Let's let people drop in on that. And today is a real treat for me because I think unbeknownst to him, Joe Calloway has been sort of an inadvertent mentor to me. He has been the, unbeknownst to him, the inadvertent, the mentor in absentia, because as I got into the business, originally sort of the speaking and the consulting business, in marketing and branding in the early part of my career, I watched Joe Calloway. I had read the book, Becoming a Category of One, which for me was a seminal book, along with Al Rice and Jack Trout with Positioning the Battle for Your Mind, and even some of the early, I'm trying to think here, it's just some of the other ones, but there was something about becoming a category of one and recognizing what it took to create a level of singularity. And so I just devoured this book. And then when I was at a meeting for the National Speakers Association about 20 years ago, I saw that Joe Calloway was there. And so I had a chance to sit in on a session on consulting. And I'm watching like hundreds of people sitting at the feet of the master as Joe explained sort of the process. But Joe, I will tell you before, and I sort of have to officially introduce you. Some of you are listening by audio, some of you are watching by video, and have a chance to see him and his smile as well. But there were things that were discussed, and you were talking about that you saw that as your primary job was to be the most informed person in the room. You never said the smartest person, but
no, because I am never the smartest person.
Oh, you're certainly in the top whatever. But that your job was to read X number of newspapers a day, which also tells you back to 20 years ago when we were having this conversation that we were talking about newspapers and everything else. But I just marveled, and I just thought there's a level of class here. There's a level of hard work and knowledge and hunger for knowledge that just was inspiring to me. So I'm going to introduce and welcome our friend Joe Calloway. Joe, thanks for being with us here today.
Well, I've been looking forward to this. This is like letting me loose in a candy shop. I just love talking with people who are smarter than I am.
Nothing even close. I will tell everybody who's listening as well, you might recognize the name Joe Calloway. He's written a number of books over the years, and I'm going to give you an observation in terms of the shift that I've seen in the books and the content that you're distributing and sort of revealing to the masses as well. Becoming a Category One, there was a great book called Never by Chance, Indispensable, Being the Best, or the Best, Be the Best at What Matters Most, Magnetic, Keep It Simple, which was a nice, really simple, small book as well. Yeah. And brand new book that's coming out that, in my mind, the title of this book is, I think, the overarching theme for everything else that you've written, which is the leadership mindset. And whether you're talking about differentiation, which is the indispensable and becoming Category One, some of the other leadership mindset, the never by chance, all of those, in my mind, Joe, were under that umbrella of the leadership mindset.
Yeah, it really is. I think you're right about that.
Tell us, in your mind, what is that? What's that difference between leaders that run successful organizations and one that become truly indispensable, ones that become a Category One? What's that differentiation in mindset or execution or strategy that tends to foretell that kind of success?
It's interesting. I tell you what kind of flipped the switch on me writing this book. In the last few years, I've done a lot of work, which I've loved, with startups, with entrepreneurs. I worked with Belmont University at their Center for Entrepreneurship with college seniors. They weren't doing class projects. They were starting businesses.
Right.
I mean, real businesses. And then I did some work with a longtime client of mine. The CEO, it's a bank, CEO is probably in his early 60s, brilliant guy. And I thought, the mindset of this 60-something-year-old, very successful CEO, and the mindset of these 22-year-old startup entrepreneurs there's a lot of similarity. And so that got me thinking in terms of, that's kind of it. And I'm not talking about positive attitude.
Right.
I'm talking about the way you look at and interpret and react to the world every day, all day long. It's how a leader, this applies to the one-person business as well, I think.
Sure.
It's how you think about your reality that truly will then determine your next reality. And again, it's not about rah-rah positive attitude motivation. It's really about being very smart and very realistic and very resilient and tough and creative and all these things. But in this book, and you're right, it is kind of a looking back and then bringing it up to what's happening in the marketplace today. What are some of the characteristics of the way that really successful leaders think? And I look at it, I think a little bit more from an entrepreneurial perspective than I do a Fortune 500 perspective. Although I think the lessons apply to both. Last few years though, David, I've been working a lot more with smaller businesses as opposed to the AT&Ts and the IBMs, which used to be my bread and butter.
Sure. Well, and I sort of feel that energy as well. Even the times back in the years when I was leading Vistage CEO roundtable groups, I love the mature companies. I love the people. There's a lot of give and take in the room, but it was my small business group, the ones that were very entrepreneurial. They're on a fast growth. One of the things that we always said was don't consult, coach. These guys needed a level of consulting, but they were voracious in terms of their appetite for information and steadfast in terms of implementation. And have you seen that because we're sort of talking the macro, it is a difference in mindset, but give me more specifically, what are some of the things that you see, some of the faults in mindset that will ultimately lead to underperformance? I mean, we always say in business, it doesn't mean if you don't do this, you're going to fail, but you're certainly not going to perform at the level of others who are able to envision and implement different levels. What are those more specifically?
Let me give you one that I blogged about. I haven't posted it yet, but I will later today, just this morning, and it's a recurring theme. It's something I see over and over and over. And here's the mistake and oh my gosh, I'm as guilty as anybody. David, I'll be in front of a room full of, it doesn't matter whether it's corporate executives or business owners, entrepreneurs, whatever, and I'll say, raise your hand if you frequently have this thought. The thought is, I'm making this way more complicated than it needs to be.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, every hand in the room goes up.
Of course.
I raise both of mine. And what I see then when you flip that is that effective leaders and just effective business people, oh my gosh, just effective people that tend to be successful, have an ability to simplify the complicated. And that's not easy.
Right. But let me ask you, Joe, doesn't that require a level of experience and hindsight to be able to recognize? We all look back to boy, I would do that over again. Does it require a level of experience to simplify, to be able to recognize, oh yeah, this is overly complex. I've been through that situation. I've been through a scenario. It doesn't have to be, but doesn't it require a level of experience to be able to envision that? Or can you learn that through teaching or coaching or consulting or books or others to maybe jump ahead?
Let me give you the example of a lot of the really young entrepreneurs I'm working with doing startups. A lot of what they're trying to do with their companies is to make something, and this is good advice for anybody. If somebody wants one general piece of advice that they can take away from this and use immediately and see a pretty good return on that action, I would say it would be this. Look at your product, your service, how people buy it, how people use it, how people think about it, and make it easier. Make it easier to understand, make it easier to buy, make it easier to use. Look at everything you do and say, how can we make this simpler? And a lot of these young entrepreneurs with minimal years of business experience, we were talking about being smart. They're all so much smarter than me. They understand that what they're going to market to do is to make something simpler. I'll give you an example. Two young women at Belmont University that when they were seniors, I worked with them. I ended up being the first investor in their company, and now it's 3 years hence, and I still work with them regularly. They've got a company called Evamore, EVAMORE.co, if you want to check out the website. What they did was, being in college, they looked at the way sororities and fraternities booked bands. And they said, this is complicated and messy and a pain in the butt. What if we invented a way to do it online? And so they did that. And then after a couple of years, they thought, wait a minute, the college market is good. The corporate market is even better. And you and I see that all the time.
Absolutely.
Corporate events where at night they bring in a band, they bring in entertainment. Well, you can do all this online now. And what they did was a couple of illustrations there. One was they made something easier to do. They simplified a process. Number two, and this is true for anybody in any business, when you try something new, one of the main ways you should look at that is, I'm going to gather information and see what the market tells me. You and I both have made shifts in our careers. We've gone from doing this, then we change direction and do that. And a big part of that is, well, let's put it out there and see what the market says.
Sure.
Because sometimes
there's some painful lessons in that 6 months of, well, I thought that was going to kill, and I got crickets.
Exactly, right? Exactly. But that's another quality of the leadership mindset,
right?
Is this resilience and this ability to say, and this isn't about rah-rah positive spin, to say, this isn't a failure, it got me information.
Right.
The market just told me something. Now, what do I do with it? And so simplifying, having clarity and focus, being able, if you do have employees, to be sure that everybody is absolutely clear on what's important here and what it is we're trying to do.
Right. And oftentimes, of course, it's from the mindset of the customer. And that's what I talk about as well with my customer experience, is taking a step back and saying, a lot of people, as you know, they get into business because they're very good at what they do. They've got a great idea. They're entrepreneurial because they had a great idea. They created a new technology or something. But the whole idea of bringing that to market, some of the best disruption, don't you think that some of the most profound disruption in the marketplace, the genesis of that is somebody asking a profound question like, is this the way it needs to be done? This is the way it's historically been done. But I mean, you look at something like Uber, of course, the taxi drivers never envisioned, oh, by the way, every car around you is going to be a taxi. But the mindset was, how do we utilize existing infrastructure to create a better transportation system? And aren't you talking about that as well in terms of that simplification? But I think instead of the incremental change, how can we tweak this? Is this the way it needs to be done?
Yeah, I'm a principal in a consulting group called the Disruption Lab. And we're doing a lot of work in healthcare. Oh, shoot, I had a thought, it went away. Well, here's the thought that didn't go away. Looking at things and saying, is this the way it should be done? Healthcare is a great example. Hospitals, and some of our clients are huge hospitals. Hospitals make money when the beds are full. And yet, virtually every hospital CEO in the country will say, we know that has to be completely reversed. And what's happening is, instead of the way it's always been done, I get sick, I go to the hospital. Now healthcare is going out into, a simple example would be clinics and grocery stores.
Sure.
There's going to be, in Japan, there are robots where autonomous cars will pull up in front of your house. There's no person anywhere. A robot gets out, you open the door, the robot comes in and does very simple tests. and then sends the information back to the doctor, the clinic, whatever.
There's online stuff where you can visit with a doctor over the phone. It's like, hold that wound up to the camera. Teladoc. When I'm on the road, I can call Teladoc, talk about symptoms, send them a picture of a rash or something else, and get a prescription at a Walgreens an hour before I go on stage.
Yeah, and so you're right. It's everything from Uber to, and David, I get so stuck in it. I start thinking about, here's both a strength and a weakness that I have. Oh my gosh, my favorite idea is the next idea.
Right.
I am so in love with the next idea. Now, the danger of that is I don't fully execute on this idea.
Yeah, squirrel.
Squirrel. Squirrel. Oh, there's a shiny new idea over there. But I think the thing that I see that I get stuck in is, even though I'm full of new ideas, I catch myself defining it in the context of the way our business has always been done.
Right.
It's so, and in the context of what not only used to work, but is still working for me.
Right. The cheese may ultimately be moved, but it's there now, right? You don't want to give up that. But let me ask you real quick. I don't mean to interrupt, but is that the advantage of the mindset of this younger generation? And I'm the father of three. I've got a 24-year-old daughter who's producing for DreamWorks in Los Angeles. I got a 19-year-old daughter who's a sophomore in college, and I have a 15-year-old son. And as much grief as they get for millennials or whatever the generation, Gen Z, whatever you want to call them, the advantage is they don't hearken back to a different time. They don't have a mindset that this is the way it's supposed to be done, because they don't remember it ever being done. They don't remember a time where you couldn't make phone calls in your car, or get money whenever you wanted, or ask Alexa for whatever it is that you want whenever you want. That's the world they're in. We have to have, as we're working with leaders, and you and I both do that, it's about shifting a mindset. They've never had that mindset. And I think that gives them an inherent advantage.
There's a guy that you and I both know, Peter Sheehan, who's just brilliant. And he and I were working together with a group of CEOs, about 100 CEOs. And he just schooled them. I mean, he told, because they're all in their 50s and 60s. They all look like us, right? Like you and me. And he said, you guys have got to let go of thinking the way that you've always done it is right and the way that we do it is wrong. No, it's different. And the way that it is starting to be done is the way that it will be done. And that will be replaced by the next way that it will be done. And you guys have got to loosen your grip on, oh, but this is the way it's done. No, it's the way it used to be done.
Right. But even in yesteryear, it was done that way for 100 years. Then it was done that way for 50 years. And then, so even as we're talking to organizations right now and their strategic conversations about how do people want to buy today, the futurists, the prognosticators who used to say, listen, 20 years from now, it's going to, no, it's 2 years from now. 18 months from now. And the futuristic things, the Amazon drones and everything, that's now. That's within a year. These things are going to happen. So not only is it that mindset and that simplification, but don't you agree, and do you talk about this in your consulting, is not only how do we simplify it, but let's look ahead 2 years, what additional level of simplification is going to be expected and required and demanded at that point as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting balance of a lot of things. It's an interesting balance of imagination and what might be balanced with, well, let's test it. Let's put it out there and test it and see what the market says. Because, you know, what we think might be right on the money. Or as you said, you might put it out there in crickets. The market might yawn and say, not interested. There's that balance. There's also the balance when you talk about disruption. Through the Disruption Lab, we're working with companies that, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, and I did too. I mean, there's stuff I'm doing. It's still working. I'm still getting business doing this. And so I want to sustain and grow that success, but at the same time, let me state it in really stark terms. I want to sustain what I'm doing that works, while at the same time I invent what will put this out of business.
Right.
And replace it.
Right.
That's not easy. That's hard to wrap your head around.
Well, but even look at that. Let's go back to your healthcare example, right?
Yeah.
The traditional model was not healthcare, right? It was care for episodes of illness.
It's sick care.
Right, it's sick care, absolutely. And then under a capitated system, they get that reward for keeping people healthy and keeping them out of the hospital. That, once again, is a wholesale shift. We remember that time, and there was a time, 20 years ago, where they were literally institutionalizing teenagers left and right because there was a financial incentive to fill these psych hospitals. And you'd hear these commercials, Johnny, just come out and join the family. Leave me alone. Is your son, you know what they were being adolescents, they were being teenagers, but then they were carrying the stigma for 20 years of having mental health problems because they were convinced otherwise. Well, the system changed. They didn't want to pay for every day they were in the hospital. They wanted to say, we're going to cover this population. So there was a massive shift in mindset, wasn't there?
There really was. And yet some of the number counters in the hospitals, because it's their job, are saying, okay, we can make $4 by preventing this, or $40 for treating it.
Right.
Do the math.
Right.
But society is going to drive that change and just say, it's like Howard Beale's network. We're mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore. And so it's just, I was last year, our group, the Disruption Lab, took a bunch of executives to Barcelona, and we visited, it was like 26 companies. And it was all about innovative ideas that they could all bring back and adapt and apply to their business. And one was a major European car maker called SEAT, S-E-A-T. Mm-hmm. And my gosh, David, I don't think I saw anybody at corporate headquarters over the age of 40. And 90% of them were under the age of 30. I mean, major executives. And they said, we're looking at a future where nobody's going to be one bit interested in owning a car. They want access to a car. Right. They want to use a car. And when they get in the car, they want to sit without having to drive it, of course. They want to sit and have access to their world through the car's technology. So we are building basically traveling smartphones. And they will be owned by corporations, by government, and there will be parking lots and exchange points where you'll just get out of the car and walk away. And that, generationally, my gosh, when I was 16,
it was Jetsons.
Car,
right?
Your car was everything.
Right.
And now, there's still some kids that care about cars. There's others that I just want to get from point A to point B.
That's my son. I put all of my kids on my Uber account. So like my daughter off at college, when I'll get a notification at 2 a.m. that the Uber has arrived, I actually sleep better because I know she's not getting in the car drinking or anything else. But for them, it's that mindset. But I want to go back to what you were talking about, which is continuing the business model, the revenue source that's paying the bills while still looking for the future. Now, whether it's where the cheese is being moved or replacing your own cheese, the smart, automakers are doing the same thing, right? They're looking at the kinds that are going to replace the traditional so they don't get left behind like a Kodak or somebody else. Often told stories, of course. But as advice for those who are listening, those who are watching this right now, because I see some of the dangers of people get so enamored with their ideas that they go all in. And then when they hear crickets, they're not paying their mortgage anymore. They go all in because they're so confident. And so it's always a smart mindset. It's the same thing. It's like the best time to look for a job is when you have a job, right? Because at least you know you're paying the bills. Other people will advise them saying, listen, if you're truly all in mindset, quit your job and go all crazy. You got to still pay the bills in the meantime. But when you were talking about the testing those ideas in the marketplace, even that has shifted. And I would love your thoughts on it. I mean, yesteryear was focus groups. And we certainly know the downside of focus groups and that sort of focus group mindset that tends to elicit opinions that might not otherwise occur, but because they feel like they have to say something, right? Oh, it is. Maybe that snack chip is a little too grainy because if you'd asked them in the supermarket, they say, oh yeah, I love it, right? How are we testing ideas today compared to yesteryear, 20 years, 30 years ago? How do we use social media, technology to get more of an instantaneous feedback to find out, are we on the right track before we go all in?
Yeah, a couple of things. Number one, you're right. The focus groups, that was in many ways such a flawed way
Absolutely.
of doing it. And the other thing, the other mistake, particularly, well, not just young, a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs and would-be startup leaders make is all their friends tell them it's the best idea they've ever heard.
My mom loves my barbecue sauce.
David, everybody I talk to tells me it's fabulous. Well, who do I talk to? People that are, particularly I live in the South, they're all being nice.
Right. That's a good point. Bless your heart.
Hurt my feelings. And so here's what we have to do. And that's why if you quit your job, you better be ready to hang on. You better have some money saved or ready to live on nothing for a while. Because I think what you have to do is you can't just test it by asking people what they think. There's a big difference between that and between them hitting PayPal to buy it. Yeah. So what you've got to do is ship it. You've got to put it out to the market and say, this is for sale, and then see what the market says.
Right. The market will speak. You see this dynamic played out on Shark Tank all the time. When they say, oh, listen, this, we've got X number of likes, we've got whatever else, we've got the Kickstarter, and Mr. Wonderful or whoever else will say, how many sales do you have? And they'll say, well, we've done it for 3 years, we've only sold 50,000. I said, well, the market has spoken. They don't like this. And they said, no, people love this. They're clamoring for this. Well, if they're clamoring for it, where's the sales? And so I think shows like Shark Tank or The Profit with Marcus Lemonis, brilliant show. Yeah. What a wonderful education for the mindset and the reality of what it takes to bring something to market.
It's like in our business, or at least parts of our business, which is speaking to, paid engagements for corporate events. Sure. And I've left a trail of speakers who can't stand me because I've been like a broken record saying, well, of course, you've got to get the word out there. Right. You have to. You can't live in a vacuum. But there are speakers that say to me, it's not my speech. People love my speech. It's just that nobody's hiring me. Well, wait a minute. Do you ever give it? Oh, yeah, I'm going to do it twice this month. But then nobody is interested in you coming back and doing it again, or doing it for another division, or referring you to a friend. So it's a balance of getting the word out. And that, by the way, brings me to a new realization that's directly tied to your turf, which is customer experience. I was on a panel just the other night for the Association for Corporate Growth, and it was about getting social media to actually create business. And the point that I think the most important point I made was, it's not at all what you say about you on social media that matters. It's what, and of course you've known this for years.
Absolutely.
It's what everybody else is saying about you. It's what your customers are saying about you. That goes back to the experience that you created for those customers.
Right. And
that then it's a circle that drives all the future business.
People can love what you do, but is it good enough to get them to talk about you to someone else? Exactly. And then can it turn it? I mean, that's why I'm wondering at what point this whole influencer marketing mindset is going to collapse to an extent. Is it really about eyeballs? I mean, that was the early days of the internet. Yeah. They thought if you can get enough clicks, then it was companies like Blue Mountain Arts, right? The online greeting card company. And it sold for like $800 million because they say, well, if people are there, then we can funnel all our other products through and we can sell to them as well. There's a difference between somebody liking it and somebody liking it so much that they're willing to talk to others, and then liking it so much that they're willing to actually click and buy. You're right in the analogy. We talk about it because you and I have both speakers. You are a pioneer in the industry. I watched you 20 years ago give one of the greatest speeches I've ever seen, and everybody talks about your Let It Go presentation in Phoenix. But the difference for speakers, of course, is the audience may love it. Maybe they just love it because, hey, this was finally somebody entertaining. Yeah. Because so many vendors and others will get behind a podium. But was it so good that they said, I want to hire you for my event?
See, that's the thing. I've had people say, Joe, I get standing ovations. I have a line of people after I speak that want to shake my hand. I say, who cares? Is somebody coming up saying, David, do you have your calendar with you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have your schedule handy? Because we want to buy this again.
Right.
We want to buy this for a different group. That's ultimately all that matters. Other than that, you've got a hobby.
Well, and the other thing is there's a difference between somebody that likes something that's entertaining, even on social media, the influencers, oh, I love it. I love that she held that product. But do you want to buy it? And in our world, and those who sell influence and sell others, you and I talked about this a couple of years ago. And the key word, and you were on a panel once and I talked and somebody says, what's your biggest fear? And your answer is my answer, which is irrelevance.
Yeah.
You can have great content.
That's still my answer.
It's thought-provoking, but is it so relevant to them that they say, I want it for my organization? They may love it. Our friend Larry Winga talks about, books, we sell souvenirs in the back of the room. That's not an indication of how successful. It's an indication that they thought you were a big deal and they want your autograph.
Well, you know what's interesting, and that Larry and I used to work with speakers together, and we would put up collections of our books. And Larry would say, I sell souvenirs. And the souvenir they're buying is my picture on the cover. Look at Joe's books. My picture's not on any of them.
Never. Yeah.
Because I'm selling ideas. Larry makes money from the sale of books. I make money from a CEO reading one of my books and saying, get this guy.
Yeah.
So we got completely different business models. His works for him. That's another thing that a lot of times people don't have clarity on, number one, what their business model is, or number two, what it should be. I mean,
right.
Are you retail? Are you business to business? Who is your market?
Right. And it's I always joke about this because remember when you were in school, in high school, and we learned to diagram sentences, right, in English. And we're thinking to ourselves, when in my life am I ever going to freaking need to know how to diagram a sentence?
Right.
So here's the only diagram sentence that's ever been relevant in my business. And you can think of it on the board on the line. Who needs to hear my message? But if you put up a who with money needs to hear my message, right? Is it so relevant and powerful and applicable and actionable that somebody is willing to pay you for what you do? And for those of listening right now or watching this, it doesn't matter what your business model is. People can love you, but is there something that they need? Are you a solution looking for a problem? I saw, and I wrote about it in the book, and I failed to mention that my friend Joe Calloway here was kind enough to write the foreword for my first book. It's Not Who You Know, It's Who Knows You, which once again, strategically placed right behind me here. But I talk about that there was a product that I don't even know if it's still on the marketplace. It was called Fit Vegetable Spray. And the mindset, of course, is that we aren't getting our vegetables clean enough in the sinks. We have to spray this stuff to get them. You know what? I'm not buying it. Literally or figuratively, I'm not buying it. That is a solution looking for a problem. Yeah. And when you live in a time like we have today, where basically we have no unmet needs for most of us in the industrialized world. I mean, certainly understand there are people who have less and who have needs, but by and large, people are creating ideas because it's something interesting or clever, but is somebody willing to put some money down for it? Not just your friends and how much your mother is proud of you, but is there a market for it?
I'm working on a new concept right now that I may do. We'll see. It's very much in the works up here. And I'm spending most of my thinking about it. I'll come up with a new angle or a new idea or a new way to do it. And I say, this is really cool. This would be great. Now, who's going to buy it? Who's going to say that solves my problem? Or yes, that would really help me create an opportunity and help me more than any one of the 100 other choices I would have to spend my money on it. I'm constantly thinking about, to use old thing, nobody writes checks anymore, but in my mind, it's still.
Right. It's like we talk about the Rolodex, right? Yeah, same thing.
Yeah. Who's going to Venmo this? Who's going to going to fork over some money for this? And that's, years ago, I was doing some consulting with a guy, and we had a really fun run. He was out of Minneapolis. he said, there's a website designers up here. I want us to meet with them. So we did. And they made their pitch and they said, we can get you 30 or 40,000 hits a month on your website. He said, look what we did for this recipe website. They're getting sometimes 50 hits a month. And after listening to him talk, I said, you have no idea what we're wanting to do or who we're trying to reach. We can make a fortune with 5 hits a month.
Right.
If it's the right 5 hits.
The wrong metrics. But that's their mindset.
It's eyeballs. You think eyeballs are going to make us money. You're going to send us people that would never buy this very high ticket business to business consulting that we're selling.
Right.
It was silly. It was
you don't need, but here's the other thing. You don't need to be the best choice or a great choice for everybody. You need to be the best choice for a small segment of the marketplace. It's riches and niches. We talk about all those things. Who is it who needs what you have? But let me ask you this, because this is, I think, is sort of a fallacy. I think people get, I don't know that they necessarily have the blinders on. They get so enamored with their idea that they don't understand the context of a competitive marketplace, which is, do people like what I have? And if they'll get the answer, yes, I love it, the things taste great, but is it a better choice than all of the other choices in the marketplace? Is there room? Is there a need for it? You and I understand this when we're pitching books, and you do a lot of work with Wiley. Career Press has done some great work with mine, but no matter who you're talking to, they ask the question, why is this book needed in the marketplace? Not just what are you teaching, what are you espousing in the book? Give me an example of 5 competitors. Tell me what they do well. Don't just rip their books. And then tell me what's needed. Like, is there a need for another book on how to use social media?
You know, you touched on something that Mark Cuban of Shark Tank,
Right. Sure.
and the Dallas Stars, the billionaires.
Right.
Cuban said, and I agree with this, Wingate agrees with this, one of the worst things you can be is passionate about your idea. Because if you're passionate about it, it makes you stupid.
Yeah.
It makes you work 23 hours a day, which is fine if you don't want a life. And it makes you believe that if I just stick with this long enough, it will work. Not if nobody wants to buy it, it won't.
Right.
And
is there Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank says, take it out behind the barn and shoot it. You know? But people they don't want to feel like they've lost time, right? I've spent 2 years on this and say, what's the alternative? Wasting 2 more years?
Exactly.
They take it very personally. And there is a benefit to being all in, but it does put the blinders. I wrote a blog, same thing. I said, the passion is the biggest cause of business failure in America.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So we're on the same page.
Let me tell you something else that I think is a fallacy is people say it's not enough to be the best at what you do. You have to be the only one. Let me tell you something. I'm Exhibit A. There's 5,000 people that do what I do.
Right.
A lot of our good friends do what you and I, we speak to business audiences. Mark Sanborn, Scott McCain, Lisa, go down the list.
Absolutely.
We all do the same thing. Now, what I have to do is find that small number of clients who, for whatever reason, a client once told Sanborn, said, the thing we like about Calloway, there's something about that Southern thing that our people just like. And Sanborn says, how can I compete against that?
Yeah.
Well, you can't. So Mark's got to find that Midwestern thing or the examples that he uses, but don't think you have to be the only one. And don't think that you have to be, that if you're not number one in the market, you can't get rich.
Absolutely.
You can get rich being number 2, being number 147. If it's rich enough.
You look at a lot of different markets, and you have experience as well because you owned a restaurant as well, right? Is you don't have to be the only place because people are going to go, you just have to be one of the best 5 for your market, whether that market is defined by proximity, whether it's defined by particular taste. You know, I even say this in the speaking business. My assistant and I do a little retreat twice a year just to teach people the sort of our systems. Yeah. And I always say, you don't have to be great to make it as a professional speaker, but you got to be good. You've got to be good, right? And we know, you and I both know people who are good speakers, but they have unbelievable content.
Yeah.
And as long as you're effective in that, and of course, but I want to talk about that for a second here in the time that we've got, because I want to talk a little bit about your career. Because it's interesting, is once again, as an outsider and as a sort of an infrequent friend or connection, I've watched sort of, and you tell me if I'm right in this observation, sort of the shift from you being that performer and teacher in the early parts of your career, those black and white pictures in the hand and the air, and everything else, right? To more of a collaborative consultant. And then shifting to that on stage, less of a prepared and more of a let's have a conversation, in times of interviewing their CEO on stage, and then going to the coaching, and now even shifting to the point in your age, in your wisdom and all that you gleaned, of seeing yourself more as a mentor. And is that an accurate sort of progression of your career?
It absolutely is. And that was driven by a couple of things. One, quite honestly, David, is honestly, I get bored so easily and so quickly. I get bored with my own stuff. And I start thinking, I can't hear this anymore. If I hear this anymore, it will drive me crazy. The audience.
You mean in terms of your own message?
Yes.
Oh, I've heard that as well. If I tell that story one more time.
And I get tired of even an area. I mean, I started out being a motivational speaker, and it was mostly personality, and I was funny, and I was engaging and on the edge. And then I shifted to being a business speaker. And it was about sales. Then it was about customer, not experience, but service.
Back in the day, sure.
Service. Then it was about branding. I mean, it's just gone through all sorts of phases. And the way I work with people, you hit it right on the head. It's gotten increasingly more and more collaborative. I turned down a job the other day because the guy, it was a bureau, and he said, they've seen your stuff. They love it. They love your books. It's a done deal. I said, well, let me ask you about the group. He said, it's 3,000 people. I said, whoa. It can't be over 500 people. I would rather it be under 200, but it can't be over 500. He said, why? I said, because it's interactive. He said, well, just do a speech. I said, I don't do that anymore. I don't know how to do that anymore.
Right.
And so
you do a little overly self-deprecating.
Well, no, that's not self-deprecating. It's just that I have so shifted in the way I work that it really would be hard for me to change gears and do all the talking because I'm used to it being more conversational. But yeah, there's been a lot of shifts in my career, and I'm about to, looks like, shift it again. If the market wants it, we'll see.
Right. But I think because I've been there to an extent, but it may not be just as much about being impatient, but I think it's also sort of that, what have you earned the right to speak on? And you and I've gotten much smarter over the years. We look back to, we were doing great for what we did, but I watch you in that everything that you've learned. And once again, I think the title of the new book, and I'll plug it again for the audience as well, is called The Leadership Mindset by Joe Calloway.
January 1st on Amazon. It's not out yet.
Gotcha. January 1st, 2019. If you are listening to this or watching this after January 1st, go get it. It will be available everywhere as well. But once again, that's that overarching umbrella for everything else, is that leadership mindset. And I think as I've watched you, as well as everything that you've learned, is sort of, it's not just here's how to do it, is here's what I've learned from the best of the best. Here's what I've learned from watching these entrepreneurial companies. And now sort of, as you talk about that kick that you get from working with younger people as well. And
I'm a reporter. I'm like a writer for Business Week. My job is to understand what works in the market. Now, I've done so much of it that I can synthesize it and use it as advice and counsel for startups. But none of it, I don't think, originated from nothing in here into a fabulous idea. It was based on me working with all sorts of clients. And again, I'm on the internet all the time looking at what's going on in business.
But isn't that what you think, that in your mind, isn't that what you feel like you're selling, is your ability to pull in not only history, but everything else, and synthesize?
Yes.
You talked about even on those things where you're serving an advisory board capacity, and your job is to sit in that room and not to dominate the conversation, to be there when to say, here's the thing that you may not be seeing. Here's a new report that says, right?
Yes, you're exactly right. That's what I do. And I like that role. It's worked for me and is continuing to work as the delivery system. Randy Pennington one time said something really great. I even quoted this in that Let It Go speech. Randy said, "I don't want to think of myself as being the Coke bottle, the delivery system."
Right.
That's what a speaker is, a Coke bottle.
Right.
That delivers it. He says, "I want to be the Coke. I want to be the ideas and the wisdom and the advice and the counsel. I'm not a speaker. I'm an expert at this." And to me, one is much more valuable than the other. But
and we talk about that in our profession as well, right? Is that we don't necessarily, we're not a speaker. We are an expert who delivers content, and that content can be delivered across a variety of ways. A variety of platforms. But I was going to say, I think back to, it was probably 20 years ago where I sat in a session with you, and the part that was a big mind shift for me, and I watched this gobsmacked look on the face of the audience as people, and this was my perception as a young man in the business, sitting at the feet of the master. And you were talking about that your job is to be the most well-informed person in the room, to read X number of newspapers. And one of the questions, and this was how profound it was for me of sitting in your session, and you didn't even know who I was. I was a kid in the business at the time. But someone said, "But when you write the follow-up report and you interrupted and you said, "I don't write reports." And they said, No. But when you write the report and you said, "You're not getting it. That's not my job, is to write a report. My job is to offer insight and wisdom and perspective and help them see what's over the horizon and what's around the corner." And I watched this room full of consultants go, "Holy crap, how does he not have to write all these
He did not write a report and do consulting."
Yeah, but here's the other thing is you've been able to define your business the way you want to define it. You and I talked a couple of years ago. We sat and had a nice meal. We had spoken for Toyota together in Las Vegas. And you had said your goal is to speak less and less every year for the rest of your life. And what you weren't saying to me, "I don't want to work as much." You were talking about shifting. You were also talking about your life with your beautiful wife and your beautiful daughters as well, and being able to have that balance, and that you've earned the right. And this is, of course, what I'm on the path to, what I aspire to as well, is not necessarily doing less of anything, but earning the right to do it, to making the investments early and everything to do the kind of work that is fulfilling for you.
Well, and that's another thing. I'm very involved with, we've been in business for about 3 years now, Gilson Snow, which is a snowboard ski manufacturing company. It's doing quite well. It's run by the CEO, Nick Gilson. I guess Nick's maybe 29 years old. Everybody else in the company is younger than him. I'm Yoda.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're the sage.
Yeah, I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi. But it's so much fun. And I also got involved about 12 years ago with one and then another real estate development groups. And what that does, all of those other ventures, as you were just touched on, it buys me freedom of movement and freedom of choice, and the freedom to do exactly what you just said, which is, I could go do that and I could make money doing it. I don't want to do it.
Right.
I don't want to do that.
There are people
listening. That's a cool place to be.
Yeah, certainly speakers and others listening saying, "Okay, wait a minute. He got a call from a bureau with an audience of 3,000 and said no." Like, he's insane. It's like, no. We all know, we've heard this adage in business, of course, the most powerful word in business is no, right? It gives you the power to set limits and set boundaries for yourself, and that you're in that place. I always have what I call the 3 F's rule for every opportunity there, because we have no shortage, especially as public as we are. There's no shortage of opportunities that come to our. It doesn't mean that, you can, what do they say? You chase 2 rabbits, you don't catch either one of them. You chase 9. You have all these ventures and what's working, what isn't. Focus, right? I love in your book, that whole keep it simple and everything else. But mine, I call it the 3 F's rule. And the 3 F's are fun, fame, and fortune. And if it's not 2 of the 3 F's, I don't do it. Right? Because there's enough pain in the ass things that we're talking. Now, of course, if the fortune one is really big, then screw the other 2. I'll find a way, unless it violates whatever. See, but I'm at that place as well.
Of those 3, you could take fame totally off my list. I think being famous would be the most wretchedly awful state of being. I can't stand being recognized, or I don't I don't like it.
So, let me redefine, because this is important. Well, fame for me, because I spent my first 20 years of my career in marketing, is visibility. It's exposure.
Well, visibility in the market.
Right.
No.
Visibility, but it had to work because it was three Fs.
Yeah, there you go.
Visibility, that's something different. But for me, it's that visibility sort of drives opportunities. They have to know who you are.
Absolutely.
But me being the inherent extrovert, I mean, I am to my core, I'm that extrovert. When people see me on stage, it's the same person they see off stage and everything else. But that's how I define it. It's just that, does it give me enough significant visibility? Because for our whole careers, we're bombarded with opportunities that will, but it's great exposure, right? And we all, no pay, but it's great exposure. Yeah, you can die of exposure. Yeah. But anyway, I don't go too deep in that. Listen, I want to respect your time as well. So listen, I end these with a lightning round.
Cool. Let's do it.
So here it is. Quick questions, quick answers, and some of it having nothing to do with anything else. What's your favorite place to travel? Place you've been? What do you want to go back? Where do you love to travel?
Well, in the United States, my favorite place, without question, has been for 30 years, still is New York City. I could take New York City intravenously. I love it. My wife and I just planned a long weekend in a few weeks. We're going up there.
And what do you do when you go? Do you do Broadway shows? And
yeah, as a matter of fact, I got tickets for Network. Remember the movie?
Peter Finch
with Bryan Cranston.
Wow, doing the I'm mad as hell and can't take it anymore. Yeah,
and we're going to be sitting at a table along with a dozen other people on stage.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome!
The play takes place around us. I'm so jazzed about that. So, and outside the country, I love Rome, Italy. I mean, there's lots of places I've loved. Okay.
Isn't that great? I'm actually heading, my fiance and I are heading to Rome to celebrate her birthday. And so it's one of my favorites as well. Why is this business decision that you have ever made?
The what business decision?
Smartest business decision that you think you've made.
It was, I could say, to start in this business in the face of defying odds, but let me go halfway through my career. It was to write my first book and to pour everything. I spent $125,000 promoting that book. Best investment I ever made in my life. And it turns out it was a pretty good book.
Was that the Becoming a Category of One?
Yeah, that changed everything. My fee zoomed, visibility zoomed. Yeah, that was a smart decision.
Well, and I think it was as well, because it was one of the seminal books for me as I was beginning my career as well. Along the same line, most gratifying business venture. You've done restaurant, you've got apartment buildings, you're in the snowboard. What's the most gratifying one for you?
The most gratifying. It wasn't a business venture, although it led to a couple of business ventures. I spent 1 year as the executive in residence, I mentioned this, for Belmont University Center for Entrepreneurship. I worked mostly with college seniors who were launching startups. I loved that. I loved being around them, their energy, their just everything about the way they were approaching their new businesses and their lives. It was utterly rejuvenating for me. I loved it.
Outstanding. Now, I've also had the privilege and the pleasure of watching you through the years, social media and others. There's times when you've divorced yourself saying, I'm going to take a break for a while as well. Yeah. But I've watched your kids grow up and your wonderful story with your family and your girls and everything else. What's the best thing about being a dad?
Everything. We had our kids later in life, to the point a lot of people think it's a second family for one or both of us.
Or it's your grandkids, right?
We just got a really, really late start. The thing, because of the time that we had kids, it was at a time when I've got tremendous time flexibility in my career now. And I can, as a matter of fact, in 1 hour, I'll be sitting outside Franklin Road Academy waiting for my 13-year-old Kate to come out. They're only going half day today, and get in the car with me. And I'll bring her home and we'll have lunch and then figure out what we want to do.
Isn't that the best?
Yeah, I've been blessed with a tremendous amount of time. with my kids. And I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, I'm the same. It was fun being the only dad that was at the Halloween parade at their elementary school, or the parent teacher conference, and all stuff. Part of it I miss. I will tell you, as I mean, I started my son was born when I was 40, and everybody talks about how fast, but it is watching my last one at home, and there's that dichotomy of being torn between saying see ya and going off and buying the Harley Davidson or whatever else, and just wanting those squishy, yummy kids and everything.
I'm right there, dude.
Isn't that the best?
Yeah.
Hey, listen, huge treat for me. Great catching up, and I hope others enjoyed listening in. Once again, Joe Calloway, if they want to get in touch with you, if they want you to come and speak or consult or tap that wisdom and that brain oozing through those gray hairs of yours, how do they get in touch with you?
JoeCalloway.com.
That's it.
CALLOWAY. JoeCalloway.com. They can email me from there. The blog's there. There's free videos that they can download. There's all sorts of stuff there.
Yeah, a lot of great resources.
And
I would tell people, look him up. Just look at, and the books from the early one of Becoming a Category of One, his new one, The Leadership Mindset. Look that up on Amazon and others as well. Big treat for me. Joe, thanks for taking the time. And for all of you listening as well, those of you watching on video, please take time and click on some of the other ones. I have some phenomenal colleagues who have their own level of brilliance and some great conversations. Please click below, subscribe to this as well. We're on C-Suite Radio. We are on iTunes and everywhere else. Once again, the Very Visible Business Podcast. And I'm David Avrin. Thanks for joining us.
For past and future episodes, be sure to subscribe at theveryvisiblebusiness.com. You can also learn more about David Avrin's keynote speaking and consulting at visibilityinternational.com. Connect with us on social media and check out David Avrin's latest book, Visibility Marketing, at Amazon.com. This has been the Very Visible Business Podcast with David Avrin.